can't believe I'm doing this, man. An apology video. I mean, this is just for the big YouTubers and their toxic controversies. You know, I only got 352 subscribers, but I feel the need to do this. I feel the need to do this. So Larian Studios, Baldurs Gate 3. I'm sorry. Okay, I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. It should go without saying that the year of 2023 was absolutely historic in terms of quality video game releases, and despite this, Baldurs Gate 3 exploded on the scene and trumped them all. Every year we have one or two games that kind of takes the gaming landscape by a storm. Here in 2024, you know, we've got Helldivers 2. I think that's kind of cementing itself into that category. But in 2023, Baldurs Gate 3, I mean, you could not go anywhere. You could not talk to anybody without hearing positive things about this game. And I think something that was so interesting and appealing about it is where it comes from. Such humble beginnings, if you will. I mean, it's a CRPG from a small independent studio that says nay to the big corporations and the monetization that we're seeing in modern games. And they just tackle what is pure and fun and creative about video games. I mean, last I checked, over 10 million copies sold officially. Developers and the CEO of Larian Studios absolutely baffled by the popularity and the positive word of mouth. Very thankful, of course, but just overwhelmed really by the explosiveness of this game's success. But despite this, I still had my reservations. I certainly did not pick up Baldurs Gate 3 on day one. I mean, CRPGs, I've never played one. Games that are over 100 hours long, I tend to stay away from those. Like JRPGs or just really lengthy, in-depth RPGs, I tend to stay away from those. I don't got that kind of free time typically. The top-down kind of tactical style battle systems, I've never been very good at those games. I've tried playing lots of tactics games, Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy Tactics. I suck at those games. So that was kind of concerning to me too, even though it is a little bit different. And on top of all that, oh my God, it was digital only. You guys know I love my plastic. It takes a lot for me to buy a digital game, especially at full price. But I let FOMO get to me. I did. The word of mouth, the hype, the positivity, I said, okay, it was just too much. I've got to try this game. So I bit the bullet and I bought Baldurs Gate 3 and I kind of bounced off it. You see, my intention with Baldurs Gate 3 was to play it entirely cooperative with my wife via split screen. Now that was a big positive for me. When I saw there was split screen couch co-op, I was down for that. I said, okay, if I buy it and, you know, I don't even have like that great of a time, I can still get value out of the game because I'm sharing an experience with my wife, who's not the biggest gamer in the world. So that would be really fun and like memorable for me, right? So that's where I thought I would get my enjoyment out of the game. But that ended up kind of backfiring on me, not playing with my wife specifically, but how the game operated in co-op. I felt really slowed everything down and drastically took a big hit to the performance. Frame rate plummets. Both player characters can go anywhere in the world. You don't have to stay in the same general vicinity as one another, which honestly I think would have been better, kind of like a Diablo kind of a setup where both player characters have to be on the same screen at the same time. But Larian decided to do true split screen, and each player character can independently go wherever the heck they want on the map. And by doing this, you're essentially asking the console to stretch its limits to render all of these assets and NPCs, and so much of the environment is interactable, and all those things have to be operating at a sufficient level for both player characters on their respective screens. So right away, it feels like you're playing underwater. You're moving underwater. It's pretty downright terrible, if I'm being honest. The game also allows you to talk to multiple NPCs at the same time. So if player 1 is talking to an NPC, it's fully voiced. You get the whole zoomed in cutscene and whatnot. But player 2 can also go talk to a different NPC at the same time. But that NPC will not be voiced. It's just text on the bottom of the screen. So yeah, I think you can understand the difficulties there. You're trying to read some dialogue text while there's another voice coming over the speaker. And at that point, it's just not even worth it to try and talk to multiple NPCs at the same time, even if it is a novel idea. The text in the game, the text is already so small, and inventory management is a massive part of this game. You're trying to sift through your backpack to look at what items you have and their uses, their abilities, maybe some scrolls that have different spells attached to them, and you're trying to read this itty bitty text. Even on full screen, playing single player, it's pretty small. You got to kind of lean forward and squint. Playing split screen, 10 times worse. You literally could not read anything in split screen without straining your eyeballs. The general pacing of Baldur's Gate 3 is already slow by design, and that's fine. Add a second player into the mix. Now you're kind of conversating with one another about every little thing that's going on in the game when it comes to dialogue choices when talking to NPCs, quest options and the different routes you want to take, because there are obviously different ways to approach certain quests and different endings depending on your choices, and even smaller type decisions in the middle of combat, like, hey, should I use this spell or that spell? Should I ice the floor here or shoot a fireball at that enemy there? You know, every single move, every single decision is no longer just you deciding. It is a conversation between yourself and your partner about what is the best decision to make right now. And so it makes a slow game even slower. And we're talking about an RPG that's already 100+ hours long. Now I am afraid to imagine really how far that would stretch things. And now maybe it wouldn't be so bad if Riley and I were both in tune with CRPGs and more experience with Dungeons and Dragons and all the systems that were in place here, but we really didn't, and this was a learning experience for both of us. I thought with my general video game experience that I would be able to carry the load for the both of us as far as figuring out the systems and how everything works, but no, this is a pretty intense game. It really requires you to sit down and look through menus, read the tutorials, and figure out how everything interacts with each other. So 10 hours. 10 hours is what we were able to put in. 10 hours is what we were able to tolerate before we kind of just, as I said, bounced off of Baldur's Gate 3. And ultimately, I stepped back and said, well, I guess this game just isn't for me. I guess the tried and true 100-hour RPGs are not for Dylan was once again proven correct. So fast forward 8 months, and I find myself in the mood to revisit The Lord of the Rings, the original trilogy, the Hobbit trilogy, and even the series The Rings of Power. I rewatched that as well, and I binged it all back to back to back. And that really got me itching for some fantasy adventuring. And I said, you know what? There's no other big games releasing that I'm super interested in right now. Let's give Baldur's Gate 3 another shot. So I made a ranger elf, named him Legolas. Hey, we're just gonna role play as Legolas here, and see if Baldur's Gate 3 can grab me. And grab me, it did. Playing Baldur's Gate 3 by myself this time, honestly, improved the experience pretty severely. Again, nothing taken from my wife. I very much enjoyed the time that we spent playing this game together, that experience. Anytime I get a chance to play a video game with my wife, that's a special time for me. But playing the game by myself, like I said, it resolved the frame rate issue. It resolved the text size. It sped up the general pacing of the game because no longer was I bouncing ideas off another person and having to kind of have these long drawn out conversations about every single decision. It was my decision now, and I could just kind of pick and choose what I wanted and keep going and explore what I wanted to explore, skip what I wanted to skip. It just made the entire experience so much more streamlined for me. I only had one inventory to manage. Praise Mistra. I was finally starting to see what everyone's been talking about these many, many months. I could play the game. I could experience all the little minute details in the environment and talk to all the NPCs and hear their backstories. And I could take my pick of the plethora of branching pathways and truly engross myself in the tactical battle system that was in place here. Because man, I got to give credit where credit is due, specifically to the environments, to the battle arenas in which this combat takes place, because I think that is where everything kind of comes together, revolves around. The ways you can manipulate the environment, like applying grease or ice on the floor to make your enemies slip and, lose their turn. Shooting braziers to fall down and crash onto your enemies in a fiery explosion. And even something that you think would be a small detail, like simply moving to high ground, can be fun. Especially for me, whose created character is a ranged bow user. Getting the high ground was paramount in every situation that I could possibly make it happen. And with the variety of environments in which you do these battles, it almost became a puzzle of how do I get higher than all of my opponents so I can have the attack roll advantage. Whether you simply run to the high ground, jump from platform to platform, find a group of vines that you can climb, you can use a variety of spells or even a teleportation arrow, which does exactly what it sounds like, warps you to the point at which you shoot the arrow. Your positioning and preparation before the battle even begins is so much of the fun. I'm a very creative and outside the box thinker, so I made a stealth archer, whoever heard of that before, and I like to separate myself from the group, sneak off somewhere behind enemy lines that they can never detect me because my stealth rating is so high, and I always get the first shot off, and sometimes the first 2 shots. And now all the enemies are caught off guard, they're stunned, and I'll send in the rest of my squad in a pincer type maneuver. And of course, the variety of characters that you can recruit in your party are so vastly different. A vampire, an alien, a demon, a bear man. It just makes it so that the replay value is always there. If I make another character, as soon as I'm done with this first playthrough, I'll just change my party up and I can guarantee you I will have a very, very different experience. But moving on from the combat, I want to talk about the progression for just a second because it's very, very slow from leveling up to finding more powerful equipment. But I think this is a major strength. Instead of constantly showering you with gear that increases your damage by 0.05% or provides you with passive buffs that you hardly even feel during gameplay, progression in Baldur's Gate 3 feels significant because it could be hours before you find a stronger weapon or a piece of gear that fits perfectly with your niche poison mage build. And of course, the story and the replayability that it provides, such a large cast of characters, all with fleshed out backstories, motives, and growth to discover. This playthrough I recruited Lysel, Gale, and Shadowheart, kind of the base 3, but my next playthrough may consist of Will, Astarion, and Karlach. And with this, I can expect a drastically new experience, both with gameplay, but also the narrative. So not to drag this video out much longer and continuously repeat things that people have been saying for months and months and months, I'll just say that I've always had problems with these 100-hour RPGs. But games like Baldur's Gate 3 have shown and proven to me that, no, I don't dislike these kinds of games. I dislike the grindy and uninteresting aspects that so often come with these games. If you can keep my attention with excellent combat, music, and narrative plot threads, I will gladly commit the time. The feeling that Baldur's Gate 3 instills in me is that I never want this adventure to end. I feel like I could live in this world and play this game forever. Baldur's Gate 3 went from a game that I just kind of thought wasn't for me and turned around and became one of the best games I've ever played. And I've never experienced anything like that before, which ultimately leads to this video's question. Have you ever played a game that you kind of bounced off or maybe outright hated or disliked and then came back around a few months or years later and loved it? I'd be very curious to know in the comments and kind of how that process came to be. So please feel free to leave a comment. I'll definitely reply down below. But with that, I'm not going to take any more of your time talking about the greatness of Baldur's Gate 3 because I want to go play some Baldur's Gate 3 right now. So I'm going to end this video. Like, subscribe, share it around. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.